Hello, and welcome to In the Kitchen with Brett Thorne, a food service industry podcast by Nation's Restaurant News and Restaurant Hospitality. I'm your host, Senior Food and Beverage Editor Brett Thorne, wishing you a Happy New Year in what is my first podcast of the year. I try not to put too much weight on New Year's and, sort of calendar-oriented milestones. I don't make resolutions, or I don't make them at the beginning of the year. If I see something wrong in my life, I try to fix it when it needs fixing, and probably have about the same success rate as people who make New Year's resolutions, which isn't that many. But so far, things are looking, kind of good for 2024. I'm sensing a lot of optimism, good feelings, plans for a robust and dynamic future, a lot of creativity coming from a bunch of different people, including my guest today, José Spero, who you might know from his various restaurants in Washington, D.C., Reverie and Bar Spero, or his participation in a Netflix series, The Final Table. And you might also have known, or maybe not, that his restaurant, Reverie, burnt down in August of 2022. But he's about to open it again in February, next month. And so he has done a lot of preparation for that. He, apart from having a third kid, which he did shortly after Reverie burnt down, he continued to run his other restaurant, Bar Spero, and he traveled the world doing pop-ups at a lot of big-name restaurants all over the place. And he is now back, ready to open his new restaurant and share all of his learnings. The pandemic and the fire and being a dad and a bunch of other things have really given him a new perspective, and I think it's one that all of us can benefit from. So I will stop talking and hand it over to José Spero. How are you doing, José Spero?
I'm doing well. Thank you for asking. How are you doing?
I'm doing pretty well. I'm glad to chat with you about what you're working on. Could you have an old new restaurant opening next month, right? Reverie?
Yes. Yeah. The restaurant, I said I would never reopen a restaurant like that again, and I'm doing exactly that. I had to beg, borrow, and steal, get it open. I'm 2-0 for that one.
Well, 2-0.
Well, I guess I thought I was never gonna repeat myself. I was like, yep, I'm doing exactly the same thing again. So Bar Spero is a different beast. Like we have a great partnership with our building here, and it was a very different kind of raise. And I was like, man, I'm only ever gonna build a restaurant like this again. Make it as easy as possible, and no stress. And then obviously, Reverie was, it's my first restaurant. I had just moved back from Spain. I knew I wanted to open it, and I was gonna do whatever it took to get that. I had, being a line cook for the majority of my life, it's not like I had a trust fund or a bunch of money saved up. So I had to do whatever it took to get it open. And that was like one of the most stressful things. And, I had no kids at that time. It was just me and my wife. And I was like, okay, I'm going to make it easier this time around. If we ever open another restaurant, we're not going to repeat that path. And then, the fire decided it was going to wipe it all away, and I was going to have to start over. And again, we were in the same boat. Insurance was there, but 2016 versus 2023 prices are very, very different. So I felt like I was, although making some slightly more mature and thought out, used critical thinking a little bit more than I probably did the first time around. It's still kind of the same process, but yeah, it feels good knowing that we're bringing it back, and I hope the intent is to make it better than it was.
Well, so let's rewind a little and catch our audience up about what you're talking about. Who are you?
Oh, yeah.
what was Reverie? What's Bar Spero?
Yeah.
What's going
Uh,
on,
yeah,
Johnny?
so I'm Johnny Spero. I'm a chef here in DC, and I have two restaurants. I have Reverie, which I opened in 2018, and then Bar Spero, which I opened up in 2023. So Reverie is my seafood and vegetable tasting menu restaurant. They got a Michelin star. And then Bar Spero, newly opened, a little over a year, inspired by my time in San Sebastian. Open fire cooking, still very seafood driven, but a la carte, kind of meant to be a little bit more for the masses. It's also, I could probably fit like four reveries inside this space. So very different restaurants. So Reverie is coming back. Reverie 2.0, as it's been dubbed by everybody, was taken away from me by a fire. We've been kind of dealing with this process for the past like 17 months. Um, yeah, it's been kind of wild. It happened in August of 2022, which is still very weird because I still haven't adjusted to saying 2024. So I was like, no, that was yeah. So my calendar year is still a little screwy, but yeah, we lost it, tore it apart, and we're in the final stretch of bringing it back.
And it was like totaled, right? Like it was a big fire.
Yeah. The Wow, incredibly devastating. Like took everything out. Between the smoke, water, and fire damage, not a single thing was salvageable. Um, so just kind of insane that it's there one night at 10:30 when you leave the restaurant, and then gone 3:30 the next morning when you're standing there and kind of awe and shock and not really sure what kind of emotion to feel. Because I feel like the past couple of years for every industry, not just the restaurant, but we were just like so overstimulated with every change that occurred with COVID and all regulations and trying to survive and support my family and make sure I was supporting our staff. And you're just kind of staring there just blankly through a completely shattered window to a restaurant that was there a couple hours ago, just like completely devastated and destroyed. Like I love that space, and that's why we went back. Um, I never even actually, everyone always asked me, why do you want to go back to that restaurant space? And I don't think I ever even explored any other options. Like I was not gonna walk away from it. Um, I spent, years keeping it going and, destroying myself to keep the doors open and make sure we could pay everybody and make sure my family had groceries on the table and that I was still able to like have like some kind of, creative outlet. But yeah, like someone asked me, like, do you think you could have gotten insurance money and opened up a new restaurant? I was like, well, shit. I'm like, I don't know. I didn't, it never occurred to me to even like really think about moving it because the story of Reverie is it's down an alleyway off a one-way street on the back corner of a historic apartment building that no one can find. And we managed to get a Michelin star and get some national attention that way. So why would I bother changing the location? Maybe
Because the
it's
location,
easier, but yeah.
yeah, I was going to say, because the location you were in was destroyed, which,
Yeah.
and so that was August of 22. So you were probably thinking, okay, pandemic seems to be pretty much over. Now it's smooth sailing.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Definitely.
then fate handed you a cruel
Yeah.
letter.
And we saw there was like a light at the end of the tunnel. We just lost money every year as like every other restaurant and a lot of businesses did. And we were like, oh wow, like our projections show that we'll probably be profitable. Our investors will probably get a little bit of return. I might be able to actually pay myself, a better salary. We were, weeks away from opening up Bar Spero. My wife was very pregnant with our third child. So it just, yeah, overnight just kind of took it out. Like I was in such disbelief from that, like phone call, the text messages, and even like physically seeing it. I don't think I ever thought, no, this isn't happening. I just walked and was like, all right, maybe it's able to sweep it up. But not the needed a little bit more work than that.
So you didn't take any downtime. You didn't take to your bed or,
No, I gave myself
um,
one day. Like after kind of navigating the first day of, getting um, a company called Serve Pro, who was already there on site because they were actually they're a company that kind of evolves with, they deal with natural disasters and fire removal and things like that. So they were already there actually because there had been another fire in an office building months before. So they were on site. The insurance adjuster or like, yeah, the insurance adjusters were there on site. Like everybody was there waiting. And in my mind, they were kind of like vultures, and I was not very nice to most of them. I was like, you're just trying to fucking take my money. I'm like, and try to talk me in one of my most vulnerable states. And I'm pretty sure I told one of the guys to go fuck himself, part of my language, but I ended up using them because I'm like, okay, sorry. I assume sometimes the worst in people that they see somebody that's vulnerable and they want to take advantage of it. But after that day of like cycling through that, I went home. My wife was there with our two kids, and I had to take a shower because I was covered in like soot and just garbage. Took my motorcycle out, like rode nowhere, just like sat on it for like an hour outside in the parking lot. Went home and then started planning what was next. I had an entire team that was not only my team at Reverie, but I had the team for Bar Spero ready to go. Like they were working out of that restaurant while we were finishing construction here and getting, permits set. So I have, not just my family, but all these other people that were relying on me to like make a decision on what we were going to do and how we're going to move forward. So I just like probably every adult male just repressed every emotion and buried it down deep. Um, I've been alcohol free for 5 years and I didn't start drinking again, which I think is everyone's the most impressed by. And then just kind of like put my head down and we worked. We started the whole process of the rebuild, got this restaurant open, and then planned out our world travels to kind of keep Reverie alive and kind of redevelop it in our mind where we wanted it to be and go, and found the best way to do that was to get out of DC. So yeah.
I mean, I guess in a way, having a lot of work to do keeps you from like being trapped in your own despair.
Yeah. I mean, I think, being not buried with, or burdened with the responsibility of a lot of other, not just my own life, but so many other people and like so many other things that had to get done. Um, that I knew if I kind of like sat idle, something would fall apart and wouldn't turn out. So, yeah, I think the fear of letting everybody else down, but knowing that I had like a punch list of things that I had to get done probably kept me from just falling down like this weird, dark, negative path. Like I had to choose the other direction entirely. But yeah, it's good. I mean, it's like, the thing that's kept me motivated the most is like my family. Like, we have 3 kids now. My wife's to stay at home with them. And like, I want to make sure that we can pay our mortgage, that, I can keep groceries on the table, and, whether, that doesn't feed the creative side of my life, but like my children and my family are my life. And that a restaurant, as we've talked about, can be taken away in a matter of hours, but, my family will always be there, and I have to make sure that I can take care of them, and that, if I lose everything, if I have them, then I'm okay. So that was like a very eye-opening kind of like, I've always loved my family and they've always been the most important thing to me. But, coming home to them after the fire, and every night that I come home, every morning that I get to make breakfast for them, whether they're yelling at me because I made them the wrong waffles, it's like truly the best part of my day. And it reminds me that, just because I'm a chef who had a Michelin star restaurant, and, I have a bunch of followers on Instagram, and I was on a Netflix show, that I'm still just a person. I don't live my life by a title given to me by anything else other than that. So, yeah, I'm Johnny or Dad, whoever's calling me that. So yeah, and they're always gonna need my attention, and I'm always gonna need them too. So where the restaurant fills a bucket, my family fills a much larger portion of that.
When you also had Bar Spero, which you said open, you were getting ready to open, right? As
Yeah,
it burned
yeah.
down?
So the fire happened end of August. We opened up in September. So I had to,
Hmm.
I feel like, the opening of Bar Spero was definitely, I don't say it wasn't strong, but it was, it was weird just because it was hard creating when I felt like I just kind of lost everything. And we had been developing the menu, and I don't think we, looking at the accolades that we received in our first year. I mean, we're like Bon Appetit, Rob Report, Esquire, all this stuff, like best new restaurant. And like, I feel like we're always very much beloved by the industry. Chefs love what we do here. And I never think about like, what this restaurant would have been without the fire. I'm like, would we have opened differently? Would the menu have been different? Would we have like still gotten the same? Would I have pushed and like focused so hard on this space because I didn't have Reverie? Like, what we have done would have been the same. And again, you can't go back and think about it. But I always wonder if that, if it pushed me more or if it held us back, because I was in such like a weird emotional state. But when we look at like on paper, like what it was and what it's done, and then where we're going, I think, it was it was not the best thing that could have happened at the restaurant, but I was able to focus so much more attention on this space because I wasn't working service at another restaurant at the same time. So, we did travel quite a bit, for the first, especially the first like 6 months of the year, but it was like a week here and things like that, that I wasn't completely uh, removed from here. So I've never actually had to have these restaurants open at the same time, which is like the most frightening fucking thing to think about. Um, Everybody asked me, they're like, "How are you gonna do it?" I was like, "I don't know." Like, tell me what to do. Reverie's gonna take a lot more. I mean, both restaurants are very much me. Bar Spero is my, obviously my name, but it's like my story and like my year living in Basque country, and those restaurants and like that nightlife and like how those restaurants made me feel. That's what Bar Spero is supposed to be, which doesn't necessarily need me be there like to be there telling the story. But Reverie, like it's an open kitchen. I'm there every single night. So figuring out how does one not lose by me having to split my time a little bit more. So I'm lucky I have a very good team here who has learned how to take my crazy wild text messages and ideas and turn it into a reality. And same thing at Reverie. So I feel like there will be a healthy balance at some point, but don't know if that's gonna be 3 months or a year from now. We'll figure that one out.
Yeah, that does seem to be more of a priority for chefs now, having balance, which is something like pre-pandemic. I don't even think it was part of the conversation. Chefs just worked
No,
themselves to death.
it's like work yourself until you're dead.
Hmm.
And I saw a lot of chefs that I respect who, you know, in their 60s were still in the restaurant every single day, maybe not necessarily by their own choice, but because they were physically in the kitchen. And, I thinking about like, I'm a triplet. My parents did everything they could to keep us, uh, you know, going like again, roof over our head, food on the table. But they both worked full time, and like, how do I not be the dad that can't go to the soccer games or can't pick them up for school or can't make them breakfast? Because I saw how much, the sacrifices that my parents made to keep our family going. I was like, how do I do that, but also not like hurt myself physically by getting 3 hours of sleep and doing that. So and I think that's like the greatest switch. The greatest thing that come from COVID was that conversation. It's like, well, why do we have to work 16-hour days? No one's holding a gun to your head to do it. Are you a better person at 10? Again, like we still work long hours, longer than we probably should, but um yeah, when you kind of look at it, you're like, well, the guests aren't going to know if I've been here since 8 o'clock in the morning. Can we still get the same amount of work done? And it's all about, yeah, I think it kind of like put time management into perspective for a lot of us, which we never really had. You thought you had to be the first one in and the last one out, or your staff wasn't going to respect you. Because you try to push them out the door, be like, you guys can't work here 100 hours a week. Well, they're like, well, you are. I was like, well, it's kind of like the do as I say, not as I do, where the chef's like, sometimes the opposite, where they're out getting drunk or drinking champagne at the bar, and you're grinding in the kitchen. It's like the other way around. It's like, no, you're preaching this work-life balance, but you don't do it. I was like, yeah. So that was and when COVID, when we didn't have like, a dining room filled with guests, and it was like me and Seamus, my sous chef, who's actually here with me at Bar Spero now. We would we were like smashing burgers, and then we started going on, we both cycled for transport. We're like, all right, let's just start riding our bikes more. And he's an insane cyclist. He weighs like 110 pounds soaking wet, and can just trying to follow him on a bicycle is wildly frustrating. But we would start going on rides for like 10 miles, 20 miles every day before or after we were doing some stuff. And it's like, oh yeah, like we can find things that we love outside of this restaurant. It's fine. You're allowed to have, hobbies. So that's, again, I'm not very good at that. I'm trying to get better at it, like remembering the things that I liked when I was younger. Like, I used to play guitar. I was like, well, I haven't touched a guitar in years, and I like riding my bike, so maybe I should start doing that a little bit more. But yeah, not waking up and running straight to the restaurant is not gonna be the thing that closes my restaurant.
It sure isn't.
Yeah.
Oh, and Bar Spero and the upcoming Reverie are really different, right? Like Bar Spero is like a fun, festive San Sebastian seafood.
Yeah. I mean, it's from like a physical space as well. They're entirely different. Like Bar Spero is smack dab in the middle of like downtown off of, like Third and Mass, 20+ foot ceilings, all glass windows. The kitchen's partially exposed, but it's mostly like a dining room and bar. And it's a la carte. It's supposed to be like you can get like a burger, beer, and a shot at the bar. You get like a whole grill turbo. Like it's I don't necessarily call it like Spanish food, but it is like what I would go eat at these restaurants in San Sebastian on my night off, and like the way that it like kind of made me feel. That's what you wanted to. It's like yeah, that's like it's like that style of dining through my lens. And Reverie is like super small, very very short ceilings, in a back alleyway, and it's kind of like an escape, right? Like so you could be. The whole idea is that you could be anywhere else in the world, and you're just kind of like hyper focused on what's going on in the kitchen. We're delivering all the food, and it's very much like a sensory experience where both kind of tell a very similar story, just a little bit different. Like it talks about my approach to food and our approach to sustainability as people and product, but entirely different way. So it's fun. They should both feel like they're coming from our team, but I don't think they could be more different as far as like I guess we also talk like approachability. Um, we don't want Reverie to feel like it's this crazy high end experience that only a handful of people can experience. Like we have this like mentality that everybody deserves nice things, that we should make an inviting space in both ways. But if you're not on the tasting menu, just go chill at the bar at Bar Spero and get like a burger and some oysters and things like that. And Reverie can kind of indulge in a slightly longer story, a slightly larger format.
Well, it's tasting menu only at Reverie, or will be when you
Yeah.
reopen.
Yep.
Which that is it's a luxury. It's an expense.
Of course. Yeah. Um, and it's like one thing we talk about like obviously like prices and things like that are a lot of people charge a lot because they pay for luxury ingredients and like luxury, but that's also like I feel like that's a very it's defined. We define what luxury is. So like the ingredients that we use, but also how we pay our staff. I think that's where a lot of that menu cost comes from. Like we want to make sure that everybody can take care of themselves and can pay themselves, and like that's where a lot of our focus has gone. Sustainability of people is we care about where our food comes from, but we want to make sure that we can take care of our staff, and we recognize that not not everybody can afford to go eat there every single night. And I don't know a lot of people that could, but we treat every guest that comes into that space kind of equal. Like we recognize the people that probably saved up for months, and when you see the people that you can probably shell that out on a weekly basis, but we want to make sure that both of them feel like they're getting taken care of. And yeah, it's like we're lucky that we can create food in that kind of space, because it's tasting menus are not there's I feel like sometimes it puts a target on your back when you have like that price point and that experience. Like some people want to go in just ready to hate. They're like they're gonna charge this much. Let's see what they're fucking doing.
Mm-hmm.
But I feel like with us being there, like not to say like my face saves it, but I feel like because we're right there and we have like this we break down that barrier in the wall, and I'm not some asshole chef that's like yelling and screaming at his staff. Like I think we're inviting, and they see the environment that we created. It does make it a little bit easier to do what we do, because and I think a lot of from a guest facing perspective, I feel like those days of like wanting to go to a restaurant and seeing like the chef yelling and screaming and throwing pots, I don't think that's like probably enjoyable. It's probably not what you want to see. You don't want to hear that kind of stuff. But if you see a chef who's like with his team and like not, and I do lead from the side, like from side to side. I don't think I lead from above. I think that probably means a lot more from a guest perspective. I think I don't know. We'll see. But because they know we're in it with them, and I think it also helps with our staff, knowing that we're there with them as well. Like I'll scrub, clean. I've cleaned your toilets. I don't care. But we're like committed to that. And I think that breaks down this weird barrier of like this crazy Michelin star chef who is just full of himself and doesn't care about his team, when more than anything, like I couldn't do it without them. Like physically impossible to do what we do without a staff that actually is like committed to being there, whether it's Bar Spero or Reverie, doesn't matter.
Yeah, it is funny or super irritating actually, when a customer walks in and they're looking for a fight. And I
Yeah.
know as a goer of restaurants, as a customer, if I'm with somebody who's coming in looking for a fight, I don't go out with them again, because
Yeah.
that's like, how
We
is that fun?
that's like my favorite table. Like when it's a table that you can tell from the minute they walk in and sit down, and maybe the way that they're having a conversation with like the host team or like the server. I'm like, that's a challenge. That if you can turn that person around, because you have no idea what happened before they get into the restaurant, right? They could have gone into a fight with their partner. Someone could have kicked their fucking dog. They're like, great, we're gonna take it out on you. It's like, no, like you can. We're not gonna be your punching bag, and we don't let that happen. Like I don't let anybody talk to our staff that way. But if I can turn you around and have you like walk out of here with a smile on your face, again, not everybody, but I feel like that is like the best part of what we can do is that you can spot it, you can see it from like mannerisms and like just their touch and they feel like, okay, you have a very maybe a different expectation of what's going to happen tonight. We're going to break that down entirely and just have like a good fucking time. And that's what I mean. That's what dinner should be, right? Like it should be a burger or a tasting menu. Like you should leave there not just being like it's not a you went to school and you're getting an education in like the culinary world. It's like no, I ate really tasty food. I had a fucking party. So and not forcing it either, right? Like not everybody. Some people will sit there and not say a word to us, and they have the greatest time. But if we can give somebody a little extra attention who might have walked in with like, a little, maybe a little apprehensive, especially considering Reverie is all seafood, like, where's the steak? I was like, yeah, you're not going to get that. Go to Bar Spero. It's wonderful. But like, we're focusing on what we can get from, from the ocean and vegetables from our producers around here. Like, that's how we like to cook and eat. I don't eat a ton of red meat. So that was kind of like the biggest push for that. I've always loved seafood. I was like, well, then why don't I just make it all seafood? But again, there's preconceived ideas of a taste menu. You need like that slice of Wagyu beef, right?
No, you don't. You don't
Exactly.
need it, Johnny.
You're right. Well, I did the menu. There's no Wagyu beef. We did it. We figured
Well
it out.
done. So how is the new Reverie, which is supposed to open in February, right?
Yeah.
I say supposed to not to be all negative just because a restaurant's not open until it's open.
Yeah, exactly. Like everyone's like, when's the opening date? I'm like, until I launch reservations, there was no opening date. Like we're shooting for like February, more than likely end of the month.
And so how is it going to be different from the old Reverie?
Well, when Reverie, I feel like there's like three phases of Reverie's life, and I'll keep them very short. Like the opening of Reverie was we wanted to be something for everybody. So we had a bar, the burger lived there. We had like a tasting menu you could do. We were a la carte. It's a 2,000 square foot space that we fit 70 seats in, which is insanely stupid because we outcooked ourselves every single night, and we couldn't be consistent enough because we didn't have, again, we couldn't please everybody, and that's all I wanted to do. And then right before COVID, we decided, okay, we're doing all tasting menu. This is what this restaurant's supposed to be. I know we built the restaurant to be something different, but it wasn't working the way I wanted it to. And again, right when we were ready to make that change, COVID hit. So we went from a la carte to COVID smashing burgers. Once we kind of got like a little bit more clarity of like what the world was going to be like during that, like we had basically cut our staff down by half because we had to, right? It was just me and a couple cooks and one front of the house staff. Like we had one server for most of this. Like, okay, we're gonna do some small tasting menus, and we're gonna get back to that. Still doing carry out. We did pizzas. We did all kinds of shit. But we kind of found our voice and our focus in the middle of COVID, which was okay. We're doing tasting menu. The kitchen will deliver all the food. We don't need a lot of hourly staff because it was like impossible to do at that time. And then once we kind of got the star and we kind of developed a lot more systems, like, okay, we can have a little bit of help from the front of the house staff. So they're not just responsible for pouring wine, and then we'll hire some more cooks. But I mean, altogether in service, there's like 8 of us, which is not a lot. I mean, that's kind of crazy. So with the reopening of Reverie, we changed the layout a little bit because we were always kind of working against ourselves. We built the original Reverie had like a counter around the kitchen, which was our only kitchen space. Everyone thought we had like a basement kitchen. It was like, no, it's this tiny little space that we had like 20 seats around. All together, we had like 70 seats. There was no space for us to actually cook. We had nothing in the back of the house that we could like plate on. It was all refrigerators and a dish pit. So we decided to really refocus the restaurant, like eliminated the counter, moved the kitchen around a little bit. So now we have an actual place to work. And we went from having like 70 seats to 28, which is more realistic for a 2,000 square foot restaurant. So no more counter, which a lot of our guests, and I'm sure a lot of people will probably tell me that they're mad about, but it was so much harder to do what we do in that space. We did it, but it doesn't mean that we did it in the best and most efficient way. So now we have like a true kitchen space with prep and room for us to do everything that we need to do. And we can focus more on the service side. So we'll actually have like some captains and floor somms that can really give a little bit more of that, that higher end service touch that we just lacked. Like a lot of the kitchen staff would go top water off, and like we would do the wine pairing sometimes too, which I still want that to be a part of our story because that's who we are. But having a fully dedicated front of the house staff that isn't just, a part-time college kid that worked at the coffee shop next door, like they helped build what it was. But we want to it's still Reverie. it's just slightly grown up a little bit, not necessarily mature, but we've added some more touches to make sense of it. Like it's all the things that we wanted it to be. I just recognized that I couldn't do everything, right? I was like the general manager and head chef for the longest time. We brought in some people to do wine. Um, we want it to be, not to say less stressful for our team. We want it to be just like this more like what we always talk about, like blurring the line between back of house and front of the house. But we didn't really, we had like, most of our staff was kitchen. So we've evened it out a little bit. So like there's more it's more balance. The back of house can deliver the food and cook. They don't have to do everything else. Like we have like a true dedicated front of the house team that'll really focus on service touches. Again, with the expectation of a tasting menu, you can get away with a lot when it's the kitchen and we're doing some stuff and it's kind of funny and quirky to see like a cook kind of stumble over his words when he's describing a dish, but missing a fork and a spoon for a dish and like they're sitting there without silverware, you're like, all right, so you got to stand there for like 30 more seconds and someone's going to scramble. Like we just want it to be less of a scramble and more of like this like ease of service and flow. And we built a restaurant that now can do that. So it just means that I can talk a lot more and not have to run around like an asshole.
Well, and just because you are a good cook doesn't mean that you can or want to talk to people in the front of the house.
Yeah.
And that's doesn't necessarily have to be your job.
Yeah. It's one of my favorite, like we'll have some cooks that are dedicated like to the inside line and then some cooks that are dedicated to like plating and running food, and we'll switch it up. Like I do like that the majority of the staff that we attract, they want to engage because they want the notoriety. They want people to know like, hey, I started making that at like 10 o'clock this morning and it's going to be gone in 1 second, but it's so much like there's a labor of love that goes into it. And if you see the person that makes it, I feel like it kind of like it kind of helps the guest appreciate what's going on a little bit more. And I like when like some of our cooks are a little bit more like robotic in their conversation, like shrimp tart with a flour on it. You're like, okay. And then there's some that I had to like not kick them, but you're like, you kind of hit, we have like like you just kind of like touch their, like right on their back. You just like kind of poke it a little bit because they're talking too much. So we like a good balance, right? There's like people that like to tell a story and be a part of that experience. And there's others that do like it as well. They just don't want to engage in the same way. And that's fine. Like, no, I'm not forcing anybody to read a script, but at some point you're going to have to drop off one course. We like, it helps them too. Like I feel like we had cooks that didn't want to say a word to anybody, and then by the time they were done with us, they're the ones that just wouldn't shut up. And like the greatest way, like all and like guess what, we have regulars be like, oh, where's where's so and so, or like, oh yeah, they're at Minibar now, whatever it be. So it's cool that our cooks, people know their names, which I think is important. Like they should get some attention.
Totally. Yeah. And it's funny for some reason. Well, I'm not going to get into it because I have a long thoughts on that, but I want to ask more about you, Johnny, because you did a whole bunch of pop-ups while conceptualizing the new Reveries. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah. So like from the day after the fire, we recognized that we had to keep Reverie alive. Like the physical space was going to take a while to get back and I needed a reset. Like the space was going to be rebuilt. Like I think it was time that I gave myself some time to I probably should have taken a vacation. But instead we did this and went into other people's kitchens, which in a way was like, I need to also not think of that as like personal travel. Like it was definitely work, but we took the opportunity to kind of travel all over the world. Like I took Rally with me everywhere. Wanted to get a crash course in like fine dining because it only ever really worked for me, but also for me to like go work with like-minded people. And I staged a lot of restaurants when I was younger, and when you become an owner it gets incredibly hard and difficult to do that. I was like, okay, let's bring up some of those conversations that we had like before COVID and during COVID about traveling and cooking with these people, because it's like the best time to do it now. So we went from January till May, and we've done a couple since then, but we went super hard. We were in California for 2 weeks. So we started off in Oakland and went to Los Alamos. We came back, and then in February we were in South Korea. March we were in Brooklyn. April we were in Portland, Maine. May we were in Kyoto and San Francisco. So we went all over the world, brought some of the things that are like near and dear to our heart as far as like the ingredients that we use that are from around here. But like for the most part, it's like let's embrace everything they have there and then start from scratch and kind of see we have our recipes, we have our technique, we have our touch. Let's use only Korean ingredients and see how that goes. And a lot of that is it was interesting to see how our food translated into literally like a different language. but still very much felt like us, which was kind of like this really cool moment where I realized like Reverie truly had a voice, and so did I. And it didn't matter where we were cooking; it was always going to be like that. Like you could be getting fish from Japan or Korea or Oakland, California, and you could always taste Reverie, which is cool. Like we could go anywhere in the world and still feel that we had our identity solidified, and it became even more so towards the end of that, where I think we even now like looking at the new menu that we're going to have. I feel like it's it shows everywhere we've been, not just like from the beginning of the restaurant to the travels, to like where we wanted to go, and like it just pushed us to really kind of throw away a lot of the old dishes that we kind of had as like, I mean, during COVID, obviously we had like some crutches that we knew people were gonna love. Only serve, there was things, but we use it as like a reset. But yeah, there's we use a lot of Korean ingredients for this one dessert because we met the family that had been doing it for decades. And, like we built a relationship with them, and I think that's what food's supposed to be about. It's a story and a relationship. It has to taste good, but there's every single one of those restaurants, every single one of those dinners will now be reflected in the menu, whether or not it's like a stamp of like this is what we did in Portland, Maine. But it changed me and it helped me kind of grow a little bit. So whether it's not, it's like as a parent, if it's I say Korea because we're using strawberry gochujang from Korea, and that's like a very easy one to say, like, oh, that's right, you were in Korea. But maybe just like a touch or approach or like the way we think about food, every single one of those chefs and restaurants and teams and trips had an effect on us, whether it's as a parent or not. So that was definitely one of the most tiring things that I've ever had to do. I mean, we would go right into a kitchen at 7 in the morning, prep all night, do dinners, and then hop on a flight back and go straight to Bar Spero with my family. And again, everyone's like, oh, it must have been nice to go on vacation. I was like, fuck, I wish I
Right.
had taken a week to do that. But it's like, I owe my wife a lot of vacation time with our kids too. But we got to work with some of the best chefs in the world, and in the United States, and like just see so many different, their mentality and their process and how they treat their staff and treat their product. And it not that we wanted to take any of it, we wanted to like justify what we did. And it's like, all right, yeah, these are good people doing a very similar thing. Like I think we had the right approach, like mostly how they treat their staff and like where they're sourcing stuff. And they kept pushing us to like, okay, there's no easy way out of this because we can't phone in a fine dining tasting menu. You can't like pre-buy this stuff. It's like, let's keep building the relationships. Let's keep pushing ourselves in this way because this is what everyone expects of these restaurants, and it's probably they expect of us too. Like we always say we have like imposter syndrome where I still see myself as like this, 15-year-old line cook. Um, and then I, look at my DMs on Instagram and email about everyone trying to come work with me. I was okay. I'm not, I'm 38. I'm not that young kid in the city anymore. Like people look at us as like one of the best and they want to work with us. It was like, okay, so we have a responsibility of showing this younger generation as well as like, people that are my age, this is where we're going to get these ingredients from. This is how we're going to treat our staff. And this is like there's not to say there's a right or a wrong way, but this is like the best practice that we could find. But we're also open to like learning new stuff. Like we don't know everything. I'm not the best chef in the world. I don't know the best way to like build a sustainable menu, but I'm trying to learn. And I think that's the biggest thing to teach anybody. Like if you feel like you've hit a point in your career where you can't learn anything, whether it's a new technique or how to better source or sustain something, then you're an idiot.
Agreed.
Yeah.
So that sounds like it was an incredible journey or sets of journeys. How do you finance staging all over the world?
Well, so like they paid for the host restaurant would pay for like me and one person, and we would like put us up in like a cheap hotel. We usually did like 2 or 3 nights of dinners that are like a slightly higher rate for the restaurant to be able to sustain that. But yeah, like I'm like, please do not think you need to put us up in like a 5-star hotel. Find the cheapest Airbnb that you can find. But they would find we planned it out far enough in advance that we could find some relatively cheap airfare. Um, we'd share like super small, especially like in Kyoto and Korea, we had like these small rooms, like nothing luxury because we're gonna be with you all day. Don't worry about that. Like I want to make sure this is like not a financial wash for you. Most of those dinners probably broke even. It covered our travel, it covered their labor. So we didn't lose any money on any of these things, that was the point. I was like having these conversations with these guys. I was like, I do not want to be a burden on you. If we could charge a little bit more and like that covers, like it's good PR. Like I think every dinner we did sold out, weeks in advance. So we never had a moment where we're like worried about making sure we were able to cover our costs because they were all pre-booked, months before we even showed up. So that was the most important thing to us. Like nobody was going to spend, like we had to spend money on labor on my end and my head chef, but that was like through the insurance process. We had to make sure that we had them on there for the reporting of that stuff. But everything else was let's make sure we're not burdening them with a bill. I mean, I don't ask for anything much. I'm like, if you can get us there, if there's a couple stops, and be the shittiest, cheapest flight, do that. I'm like, don't, because we did that first year we had Reverie. We brought so many people over, and some people asked for like better flights, and we couldn't do first class. Like I'm like, put us in coach. I don't give a shit. I'm like, I will do whatever I can to get out there and make sure that we're not hurting your business as a small business owner. I don't want to put that burden on anybody.
Well done. And you said you took Rally with you everywhere you went. Who was Rally?
Rowley is my head chef, so he started with me in August of 2020 as he just wanted to spend a couple days in the kitchen. He had just graduated college in finance, and then he was in a very different career path, but he always loved cooking. So he obviously during 2020 very hard to find a job and wasn't really sure what he wanted to do. So he started with me. Within like a month, I was like, hey, if you want to be a paid employee, you can work here. Then went to sous chef and then head chef. So he's 25, 26. But again, we had to report like a loss of, labor and, revenue and all this stuff. So we had to keep some people employed, and most of the other team, we put them in other restaurants. Some of them came here. Some of them went with friends, but Rally stayed with me, and he's been with me, for like almost, a little over 3.5 years at this point. But he's like helped me kind of develop, and like he's very good at spreadsheets and very good at like helping me figure out not say the boring part of it, but like how do we organize ourselves in a better way so it's not just me having to do everything. He's like, we can build a recipe, build a technique, and build a system.